everyone. Thank you for coming and tuning in this evening. We are continuing our work on the FY 2021 budget. Tonight, because we know these are uncertain times and there's a lot going on, and we couldn't have our normal face-to-face open houses where we can meet with residents and go through the budget in person. We wanted to make sure that we were adding as many as possible ways to get feedback on the budget. So normally on Monday nights, we don't have public comments before our work session, but we wanted to add this special one from 5 to 6:30, and then we'll have our work session tonight. I am going to be keeping track of time, so everyone will still just get their 3 minutes. I just ask people to come on when called and state where they live or what ward they're in and their name, and then we'll get going. Unfortunately, because of wanting to make sure we are able to hear from everyone who signed up tonight, we will not be sharing screens or other things. We'll just have people come on and speak. So the first person we have up is Lauren Silberman. Is Mr. Silberman with us?
No, he's not. No.
Should we go to the next person?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Anderson. Is Robert Anderson here?
He is not on yet either.
Okay, is Mr. Schlegel on? Yeah, I think I see Mr. Schlegel. Why don't we start with him?
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Perfect.
hi. Thanks for doing this. Are we allowed to ask questions or just comment?
Either one.
Okay.
No.
So I'm in 6512 Allegheny, Ward 3. In general, I favor all the reductions on the list, with the exception of the bus shelters, actions to support the tree canopy, and any grants for performing artists. And I do think deferring the infrastructure work and foregoing the contribution to the equipment replacement reserve already has $3 million at present. I think those are good ideas. My first question for the city manager is, what forecasts are you using to plan for revenue shortfalls due to the recession and the pandemic, and what amount of shortfalls do you anticipate?
Great. Do you have anything else, Mr. Schlegel? I think in order to get through everyone, I'll take down the questions and we'll either be able to respond now or when we begin our work session. So.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll ask a couple more questions then. How much in savings are possible from reductions involving salaries, wages, and promotions, other than for interns? Because I see that those types of items aren't on the reconciliation list. A third question I have is, what is the fiscally responsible amount of money to plan to have in the general fund reserve going into FY22, especially given that we'll need to be advertising for a new city manager, doing that search, and having a new city manager come on board. My overarching question, I guess, is this reconciliation list designed just to look at reducing property taxes by varying amounts, or is it designed to do that as well as fully fund the reserve, as well as deal with pandemic relief? I think that, so did you get my questions?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think that if you approved virtually every item on both the lists, including counting the holds as out and out reductions, you're getting about halfway there, in my opinion, in terms of acting prudently in this fiscal climate and with the evolving pandemic. I do think it's adequately distinguishing between our wants and needs, such as in the way it's postponing the road maintenance after a mild winter. I do think it's sidestepping the core issue of unsustainable personnel costs, given that they're the bulk of our operating expenses. Do I have any time left? I don't want to go over.
Oops, 24 seconds.
Okay. Um, I do ask that the city council reclassify the holds as out and out reductions. And that's because I believe that if later in the year it becomes clear that revenue shortfalls won't completely clean us out in our reserve, I think the city manager might be tempted to push hard to release any holds, which could put us in trouble going into FY22.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. And again, well, if we have time before 6:30, we'll come back to these questions. And if not, we'll, I'm sure all of these questions actually are ones that will be answered during our work session this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Let's see. I still do not see Robert Anderson or Mr. Silverman. Am I correct? So let's go to the next person on the list. Let's see. Michelle Purrier. I don't
I don't.
see them either. Don't see David Blockstein either. Stephen McGarry. No. Colleen Cordes. No. Teresa Gibson. I think I saw Therese, right? Oh, Stephen McGarry is here. Do you see him, Jesse?
Yes,
Okay,
he is.
We'll go to Stephen then.
Sorry about that. Yes, got him. He is.
There you are.
Okay. I'm Stephen McGarry. I live at 8112 Flower Avenue in Ward 5, and wanted to comment on the alternative proposals for reduction. Just to establish my qualifications, I do have a master's degree in public finance from Carnegie Mellon, and in my last position with the federal government, managed $60 million budget for personnel operations. I do agree with the alternative budget recommendations, particularly implementing a constant yield rate for the property taxes with no other increases. I wanted to comment that in the environment now, I'm on a fixed income and I'm having to reduce my expenses because of what's happened with the stock market. And I think it's fiscally responsible for the city to take the same approach that when you have reduced revenues, you reduce your expenses. The last one I wanted to mention that was of particular concern to me was this stormwater expenses and the increases in the rates for stormwater management for residential properties. In my own case, I'm one of those few where I've got a large lot, and when we got the paperwork, my stormwater costs or contribution to stormwater management would increase tenfold, which I think is just over the top. That something's wrong with a change that shifts so much cost to homeowners and puts absolutely onerous expenses on a few simply because they have large lots. I don't even have any concrete on my entire lot, but without getting into any details, just wanted to express my extreme concern about the way that process of redesigning the finance structure for stormwater management is being handled. And that was the extent of my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I see now, I think Mr. Blockstein is on. I think he's actually, Jesse, do you see him? He's under Deborah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, David.
Okay, great. Good. So I'm David Blockstein from Ward 3 on Sycamore Avenue. And first of all, I just want to thank you all for all your hard work and effort in keeping the city going in this challenging time. And I want to, I guess, begin with just talking about how the role of science in all of this. With the coronavirus, that we've seen that it's really important that we pay attention to science, that we act early on science to prevent catastrophe. And clearly, the analogy here is to climate change, where science has been telling us for a long time that we need to act and to prevent catastrophe. Although it seems like years ago, it was really only 2 months ago exactly that the council passed the resolution to move forward on the implementation of the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. And that emergency has not gone away. It's important that the city continues to move forward on the Climate and Sustainability Action Plan. And so therefore, I ask that you continue to at least minimally support the budget request from the Office of Sustainability. And this is a request that is consistent with the recommendation of the Citizen Tacoma Park Mobilization Environment Committee, and also with the City Committee on the Environment, which is actually even requesting an increase for that. And I think that the issues such as having a half-time intern and supporting education and outreach are even more important now, because they enhance the capability for the city to get the job done and to support our most vulnerable communities. So I hope that you will continue your work in support of the Sustainability Action Plan, and to go forward in your work on supporting the budget. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Blockstein. Next, we'll have Colleen Portis.
City Manager. Colleen Cordes, Ward 1.
Yep, we can hear you, Colleen. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Ms. Ludlow, I am requesting that you would please provide the council and residents with detailed information on total expenditures for each of the different components of personnel cost in the FY20 budget, and what were your financial assumptions that you made about each of those costs, how much they would rise in fiscal year 21. This is information that at least some council members and many residents trying to participate in this public process have been asking for weeks. How can the council develop a reconciliation list in such an uninformed way, given that personnel costs are such a major part of city spending? In fact, since residents have not yet received any of this basic information, nor, to my understanding, has the council, unless it was at the 11th hour before this meeting, I would like to urge the council to suspend this planned meeting tonight after the public comments on the reconciliation list. It should be rescheduled only after the city manager has made such information available to both the council and residents, and there's been time for the community to digest it, and for the council and city manager to have a frank public conversation about the fairest, most humane, and most effective way to rein in proposed FY21 personnel cost. As the urgent alternative proposal suggested, that means seriously grappling with freezing not just hiring, but also salaries, wages, step increases, promotions, and bonuses, and considering the full range of options before you. Again, to Ms. Ludlow, I'd just like to say I cannot fathom how this situation has gone on so long, and I am asking you right now, will you please provide that information, and will the council delay the final work on the reconciliation list until it's had time to look and talk about that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cordes. Next, we have Therese Gibson. Ms. Gibson, are you on?
Wait a minute.
I think we lost her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have a question about a couple of the.
Ms. Gibson, sorry, can you just state your name and
Oh,
where-
Therese
what-
Gibson, 9 Pine Avenue. I'm in Ward 3.
Great.
And I have a question with a couple of programs from the housing department. In particular, I wanted to better understand how the council, which is governed under a city charter that says expenditures are for the public good, funds the first-time homeowner buyer down payments to the tune of $50,000 a year for private dwellings for individuals. And on that same matter, I don't even know how much money it is. I couldn't tease it out of the budget. How much money we put into providing financial support to condominium associations that are under financial distress.
Okay, anything? We'll take those questions down. Any other questions?
That's it. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Have a nice evening. Next, we'll have Ms. Sue Katzmiller.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Sue Miller, Ward 3. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have 7 questions I think we need to answer before we can continue with reconciliation. Number 1, what are the immediate pandemic needs in our city that are not being covered by the county or state? Number 2, which staff members have time due to pandemic program cancellations and could be working instead on pandemic outreach to make sure people in multifamily buildings, the elderly, and other vulnerable residents are connecting to the resources they need? Number 3, why would we raise taxes above constant yields in the face of the biggest economic disaster since the Great Depression? Number 4, why doesn't our budget show percentage increases for added staff and increased salaries and bonuses that happened prior to the pandemic? Number 5, why did we apparently abandon the idea of time on task budgeting, which is a standard for accountability, after the council had a lot of discussion about it over a year ago and haven't heard anything about it in this budget cycle? Number 6, why aren't we addressing the dramatic increase in staff and high salaries compared to other municipalities, and the fact that we've been apparently using our reserves to pay for this increase for years? And finally, number 7, given the pandemic and the economic disaster, why aren't we addressing right now which of the excellent county services we might be able to start using, since we pay for them already but don't use them, instead of continuing to add to our staff costs and our taxes? So thank you again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next, we have Menchu Martinez.
Menchu Martinez. I live in Ward 3 on Sycamore Avenue. First of all, I want to thank the council and the mayor for all the hard work you've done with the budget. And I recognize that the council had made revisions to the budget since it was first released. However, I would still like to express my opposition to the budget that ends up increasing taxes for Tacoma Park residents. Tacoma Park residents have shouldered tax increases for almost all of the years in the past 10 years. So I don't think we are an anti-tax community. However, I think we need to be mindful of the economic disaster that that's unfolding now, and is likely to continue to get worse. I think imposing a tax increase burden on the Tacoma Park residents would come across as insensitive, considering that there are a lot of residents who have lost their jobs or have significantly lost a big amount of their life savings. I think the council before voting needs to provide or needs to get from the city manager a more detailed accounting of the personnel expenditures and decisions before the council and the mayor can move forward in this budget. Until we get that information, I don't think the council should make that vote. And before making that vote, the council should share whatever the city manager shares regarding the personnel expenditures.
Thank you, Ms. Michu.
Of
Thank
Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Paul Eubner. Mr. Eubner with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mr.
Oh, I'm
Eubner.
sorry, but you can't see me, or can you?
Yeah, we can see you.
Is there all the council there, or just you, Ms. Mayor?
No, I don't know if everyone is here. I see the majority of us.
Oh, I just thought it was supposed to be a council work session. Okay, questions, here we go. Would the city still be drawing down the fund balance or reserve, even if all the reconciliation items were cut? Are you going to answer? Or are you going to?
No, as I mentioned before, Mr. Eubner, what I said is so we can get through everyone before 6:30. We're taking down the questions, and then and because people have similar questions, we'll go back and answer them.
Okay, because
and if we don't get through them before 6:30, well, I'm sure all the questions that have been raised so far are ones that we were planning on addressing tonight anyway.
Okay, because it's just $6.5 million. In differential between revenue and expenditures, and that seems rather dramatic. And if that happens even with the reconciliation, it's a lot of money. Next question is conferences and training reductions. This year you have line 13 is 30,000 and line 28 is 11. So we got 40,000 this year, 40,000 reduction last year, and in 19 we had 36,900 reductions in conferences. So, and of that 36.9 was of $87,200 worth of conference expenses in the 19 budget. So I want to know where in this budget are the total conference and training schedules. For instance, in line on page 69, there's $90,000 in conferences and training, including $39,737 for an FBI something. Do we need that? And $10,000 for ERT supplies. They're not going to even have any conferences this year. Personnel savings, okay? In this year, line 12, I believe, $421,000 in reductions. Last year, $308,007 in reductions. And in the 2 to 3 years running, there have been $300,000 to $400,000 proposed reductions in personnel expenses. Do we really need all these people? If we can cut them every year, why are they in the budget? And why are we spending so much money on training and conferences? This is the time to cut that stuff. People need food, they need housing, and you want to pay for another stint? It's just getting out of hand. Is this some kind of a game that the city manager has where every department proposes, twice what they want to get, and then they reduce it, and that's what they end up getting? My last question is, on page 22 of the budget, it says, and I quote, balanced budget requirements, the total of the anticipated revenues shall equal or exceed the total of the proposed expenditures. My question is this to be done by the city manager or by the council? Who's not towing the line here? Is the council not doing their job, or is the city manager not doing her job? Because in the last 5 years, we've never had a budget that's balanced. Everyone required an increase in property taxes that exceeded the constant yield. That's all I have for now. I have plenty more for later. When and how we get the answers.
Thank you. Next, we have as I said, Mr. Huberman, and I've repeated numerous times since we began, we're taking all the questions. We will respond to as many as we can before 6:30, and if we don't get to them then, we'll move on to our work session at 7:30. Thank you. Next, we have Chantel. I think I saw her. Yes, you got her, Jesse?
Yes, she's coming.
Okay, great. And then after Chantel, we'll go to Nadine Block. So Nadine can be ready to go after Chantel.
Hi, it looks like I'm unmuted, but no video, but that's okay. First off, thank you so much. I do see a lot of difference between the reconciliation list from even 5 days ago and the reconciliation list today. So thank you for adding those things. I pretty much support all of the items on the reconciliation list. I would certainly add additional personnel cuts, including understanding A, what is the projected increases in wages, and B, what would you save if you cut that in half or if you eliminated it. Those are two key pieces of information that would be helpful. I do want to support the notion that there is no contribution to the ERR this year. I understand the need to ensure that we have the money that we need for equipment replacement in the future. But at the moment, the ERR actually has a higher positive balance than our general fund reserves. This is a little bit like saying, I don't know what my finances will look like this year or if I can afford to pay rent, but I'm going to go ahead and put money in my kids' college savings. So the idea is to give yourself flexibility in this year with fiscal uncertainty and keep those monies in the general fund rather than putting them into the ERR. I too believe that the infrastructure cuts that are on the hold list should be part of the reconciliation list, and the full budget can be reconsidered, for example, in the fall. Finally, I would like to ask that COVID activities be funded out of the housing reserve. As I understand it, a lot of what we're going to do there is ensure that people are not thrown out of their houses, whether they be renters or homeowners. That's obviously important. And I believe that's consistent with the purpose of the housing reserve. And just a note, looking toward the future, I do hope that in future years we have budget documents that are easier for everyone to understand, council and residents. And I appreciate staff working to make that happen. And then just my last comment on this whole process. I fundamentally believe that this year, the council should actually start with our estimated actual spending in fiscal 20 and do its reconciliation from there. There was a 12% difference. The proposed budget was 12% higher than the estimated spending for fiscal 20. Our city is operating just fine in fiscal 20. So my belief is that you should be starting with those numbers and determining really what you can cut from there in order to ensure that we have sufficient funds.
Thank you, Ms. Warza, that's your time.
Storm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. Next, we have Nadine Block.
Sorry, it's very sorry.
She's still with us? I saw her before. She's
Yes.
one of the attendees.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
she should be good.
Okay.
I'm here. Hi. Thank you
Hi.
all.
Hey.
Yeah, big thank you for people who are putting all the time in. I know this is an extremely difficult time, and I'm going to start by acknowledging the suffering that people are having on personal levels all over this city and country, and exacerbated by lots of other hard questions and many unknowns. I think, David mentioned the science. There's so much unknown about how this virus of COVID is operating, although the pandemic is definitely exacerbated by a lot of what the policies are in place. I want to, there's been really good questions asked so far. I think it's the job of the city council to figure out how to weather the uncertainties of the pandemic and this coming depression, economic depression, which it's not a pretty situation, and we do need to be compassionate. I think very clearly there are people in this city who need immediate support around healthcare access, rent, and ability to pay their rents and mortgages. I think it's clear that in this reconciliation list and the budget, it points out to me that the city is in no way ready to vote in a responsible way, given the lack of information about salaries and other needs that the city people have right now. So I'd really like to see an assessment of which staff can be allocated to helping residents in vulnerable, particularly in vulnerable populations in multiple family dwellings and elder locations. It seems very important that, as Chantal and others have raised, we need to see a budget that's easier to understand with percentages allocated given changes that are happening, and particularly making sure that we have the time on task accountability position in place so we can make some of these accounts really understandable to the rest of us who do budgets. I mean, that's my experience, not as an accountant, but as someone who has to produce budgets all the time for grants and account for expenditures. I don't see how we, it doesn't seem that the city has been over time been able to do that very effectively. I'd like to see for sure an assessment of the county services that we do duplicate in this city, whether it's on stormwater or library resources, things that I hold. Both things are dear and to me and my understanding of how the world works, and though we do in this moment need to make hard decisions so that we can take care of people who are most impacted and frontline in our communities. So looking forward to hearing the answers to these questions and supporting some hard decisions, looking forward to what will certainly be a harder moment than we have dealt with in a long time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Bach. Next, we have Keats Kirsch.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity to address the council. Thank you guys for all your hard work. I know this is not fun in these times. I want to, I'll try to be brief. I want to recognize some of the points that have already been made. I think I've spent many hours trying to make heads and tails out of the numbers in the budget proposal. I think it's terrible that it's that hard for people to get numbers out of the budget. I think it undermines democracy, and it's anti-transparency to have a budget document that's hard to read, incomplete, and apparently full of inaccurate information. I particularly tried to focus on salary and personnel expenses. Painstakingly pulled all the numbers out of the budget and compiled a spreadsheet, which I sent to all the members of the council. It seems completely at odds with what was reported by the city manager last week when she said there was a 4.5% increase in personnel spending. I'm seeing an 11.7% salary increase per FTE. That's 10.3%, or about $1.3 million. So that's completely out of line with the numbers that we've been hearing, and I don't I agree with what earlier people said, that I don't think with a budget that's not complete and not accurate, I don't think we can move forward with approving, or even trying to approve the budget. I think we need to get the right numbers. We need to present it to the public so that they can see them and evaluate it and give feedback. I do think, you know, it's a tough time. The economy's crumbling. Municipal, county governments all around the area and around the country are bracing for huge cuts. And I think we have to, I think this reconciliation list is a great start, but I think we need to go much further. We need to look at the big expenses, which are personnel and some of the capital projects. And we need to figure out ways to cut those. Hopefully we can avoid layoffs, you know, just cut spending increases and maybe have some attrition. But ultimately, probably next year, we'll be also looking at layoffs, which is going to be horrible. But I'll stop there. But I think we should delay this budget process until we have the right information where we can really make the decisions. I know we're running out of time, but I believe it would be unethical to move forward without accurate and transparent budget information. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Cynthia Mariel.
Very much. Thank you very much. I have a question for the 6 elected ward representatives, and the response requires a data-driven, transparent response that anyone can understand, the board representatives as well as me and anyone in the general public. My question is this: based on your understanding of the city manager's proposed FY21 budget, do you perceive this budget plans to have general fund expenditures that exceed new revenue income and that will be used to pay the city's general operating expenses? In addition, do you perceive that the proposed FY21 budget plans to fill the gap between general operating expense total and the total of new revenue we're receiving that is to be used for general operating expense money? And the way this gap will be filled is by drawing down money from the unassigned balance. The unassigned balance fund, which is part of the general fund, is the city's saving account, and it's intended to pay for unanticipated expenses as defined in a resolution the city passed in 2018. This unassigned balance money is not for general operating expenses. I also want to understand from the board representatives if the proposed FY21 budget plans to use this unassigned balance and how much of the unassigned balance for general operating expenses. And if this is going to happen, the answer to this question and all the questions I proposed is fundamental to making informed and responsible fiscal decisions regarding the budget reconciliation. So what I'm asking needs to be understood, the issues need to be understood, the numbers need to be understood, and the answers need to be clearly identified prior to reconciliation. And thus far, this understanding is not apparent among the ward representatives. And that is extremely problematic, because if we're using our rainy day savings account to pay general operating expenses, because there's a gap between how much money the city is getting in of new revenue for general operating expenses and how much we're spending on general operating expenses, that's a gap appears. And we're using our emergency money, our savings for this. We're going to run out of savings. We need to have savings because crises happen, as they are happening right today and will continue to be problematic for the next several years. So I just want to say several residents have looked closely at this proposed FY21 budget. We see that this problem exists. There's a gap between money in and money going out, and the general fund is being planned. The general fund unassigned balance is being planned as a Band-Aid to cover this gap, and as a result, the safety reserve money, our unassigned balance.
All right, your time is up. Thank you very much. All right, I just want to go back and see. We went down the list. Go back. Is Miss Mary Jane Machui? Was she able to join us? Do you see her?
I think she was trying to join, but I'm not sure if she actually made it yet.
Okay.
I think she may get here in a couple minutes.
All right, and then Lawrence Silberman, Robert Anderson, and Michelle. I do not see any of them. Do you see them?
No. No.
All right. Well, why don't we? I asked the city manager to address some of the questions, particularly those that were asked by a number of people. So if I want to turn over the city manager now.
Thank you very much. And, you know, I appreciate that people put a lot of attention to the budget as I always wish they do. I first want to acknowledge that this has been a tough year for budget information because we were very shorthanded and got hit with the pandemic right as we're preparing the information. And just to note that our new deputy city manager has been already in communication with the finance director and other staff about all of the ideas about what we want in a better budget document next year. So we wanted to have a number of those things this year, but I appreciate that we always strive to improve, and particularly to improve transparency. One question that came was, what was my basis for forecasting revenue? These aren't something that just come from, you know, general state kind of press releases or some other kind of national sense about reductions. These come from actual experience with the numbers that fund the revenues that the city receives. So I know what the property assessments are. I know what the income tax was from 2018 and then 2019. So I know what our normal hotel motel expenses are, revenue are, our recreation department revenues. So it wasn't a forecast, it was actually looking at actual figures and our experience with knowing which ones are definitely not going to be there in FY21, which ones probably a portion of the year given the forecasting for the pandemic response and issues. I think we will be monitoring a lot about what happens for FY22 because that's when some fairly significant changes occur. A number of people ask about wages, and I will just note that the city of Tacoma Park has 2 unions. We are in collective bargaining negotiations. We have strong support within the community for support of our unions. We do need to go through our process. That is a process that involves the council. And for that reason, there's some information that can't be shared at the moment. We also are trying, though, to provide and wish we had had better information about FY20 numbers. Part of the questions that come up have to do by looking at what's in the budget document and what comes under different kinds of formats about whether fringes are included, whether it's estimated actuals, whether it's changes because there were budget amendments, a variety of things. And I know that Jessica, or Deputy City Manager Jessica Clark, and the Finance Director and the HR Director have been making sure that they're using apples to apples numbers. As I said, I don't have all of that in front of me. I hope to have that for the council very shortly, but I think it doesn't change what the council has to do for FY21, which is identify a tax rate and the general kinds of principles that you want going forward, the kinds of services, recognizing that through the course of the year, there'll be a lot of budget discussions and you may have to do budget amendments. Yeah, it's a pandemic. We have changes that will be coming, and there will be a lot of work that's not going to be able to be known in 2 weeks or even 4 weeks, but maybe 2 months or 4 months or 6 months. And so those are the discussions that will be coming. They will involve personnel. They will involve the various items on the reconciliation list.
If I can just interrupt the city manager
Sure.
for a moment, I'm being texted that people can hear other voices as they're watching the stream. So if you are not muted, I would suggest muting yourself, because if you're talking, people can hear you. So just to let you know, I've been getting text messages from folks who are watching on Facebook and other things that they can hear you. So
Okay.
I can just hear the city manager, but.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't heard others, but that's important to know. So one of the things that we are looking at too is a number of people have asked about what activities should be expended for COVID-19 actions. We have had some recommendations from our staff, but I think as we find out from the council, kind of the sense about what also they're interested in doing, we'll need to come back to the council for more specificity about what works. And I think that's, clearly there's a lot of interest in helping individuals that are affected by housing issues, food insufficiency, that kind of thing, and food insecurity, but also in businesses. And we've been doing that. There are differing systems that might work, and those things may change over time. And so that's part of a continuing discussion. There was a gentleman who had concerns about the stormwater system. And I believe he was referring to the idea of going to the $25 per 500 square feet. While the council will be discussing that tonight, we've not had public hearings on that. I don't think that that's one of the options that's really before the council for this evening. So there will be more discussions about what the rate should be, but I don't think we have the time to change the structure. I appreciated some comments about the emphasis on science. Part of the reason that I cannot give some answers about what actually will happen is because we're following the science about the pandemic. And that's something that I'd love to have all the answers, and I don't. We have to have continued discussion. There was a question about how can the city give money to private entities. We do grants for a variety of purposes in the community. I don't believe we've given any money to any condominiums, but we do try to provide technical assistance or connect, actually usually connecting to people to technical assistance so that the condominiums, which are very much our affordable housing in Tacoma Park, have some assistance so that they can figure out how to do the right amount of their fees and their reserves. And so I think that there may be a legal question that was provided that we would need an answer for, but it certainly is a standard governmental activity to provide some assistance in affordable housing. There were a number of questions about what are our immediate pandemic needs. Again, we'll be providing that information over time. We've provided some already and we're working on it. There have been a number of questions I've heard both tonight and on emails about, well, are there some staff members that might have time that could help? We are trying to match up people, and we do have a number of staff members that are assigned to one unit and working in another unit to assist us in the COVID-19 response. I appreciate it. Sometimes it's really helpful because we can get some language skills or some other kinds of technical assistance. Not everybody has the capacity to do some of the work, and so we're trying to find other activities if there is still a mismatch. There were a couple questions about abandoning time on task accounting. We actually did keep time on task accounting for the I guess it was 5G and that kind of activity. I have yet to I need to pull it off our computer and share that, but that's not been something that came up. It was something that has been kept. And so I appreciate that our staff has been keeping track of those numbers, but I will need to get those out to share to the council and the public. That was, I think, part of the reason it wasn't shared is because I did not have a deputy city manager for several months, and just trying to keep on track on top of all that was needed to be done while really having vacancies is a problem. And on that note, the idea of keeping positions vacant can be very harmful. There are some positions that I think absolutely need to be filled for the ongoing responsibilities of the city. And then there may be other positions that over time have to be cut. But not every FTE is interchangeable with another FTE. We have to look at the skills and the needs of the different units. You know, there's a question about urban forest manager. A librarian is not somebody that can fill that in or something. And so we do need to look at what are the right skills and how do we adjust that over time. And some of that is going to change as the requirements of the COVID-19 response change. There have been several questions about, well, there was a statement that we have personnel increases greater than other municipalities. That's not true. In fact, we're generally less than some of the other municipalities. We do annual checks on what other municipalities are paying and increasing. And it's part of our union negotiations agreements that we do those checks and that we work to pay our staff at market wage. Having said that, obviously the wages are likely to change over the coming year given this pandemic and the budget, and that's something that we will be discussing. There were a couple of questions about can we rely on county services that the county provides. And so there are some services that we get tax duplication money for. Not always enough, but more this year than it looks like than we've had in the past few years. But there's services such as recreation that we get none from housing we get none from. We do get some money for police, actually quite a lot of money for police, for road maintenance, and for the library. And so as we go forward and we look at where there may need to be adjustments, that will be a continuing discussion with council. There was a point that we shouldn't be spending money on conferences and training. We are judicious about conferences, but it's also where, because we have such small staff, it's an opportunity for us to learn best practices and bring those skills back to the Tacoma Park. Not everybody goes to conferences all the time, and we've had that be kept pretty tight. We do spend a lot of money on training, particularly for police. That is an area that is important to meet state standards, and our council and police chief want to make sure that we have a higher standard for our police officers. And so a good amount of the training budget is something for our police department, and I would feel that that's important given the role they play in our community. I don't agree with not making a contribution to the equipment replacement reserve. That is a fund that is important because we are a small community, and in order not to have wide changes in tax rates to pay for a street sweeper or a couple of sanitation trucks. This was a program that was developed, I think 28 years ago, as a way to even out the impact on the taxpayers of the variations in the cost of equipment. And it is something that other jurisdictions that are larger than us do not have, because they have more money that they can move from account to account, and we don't. We are very tight with our funds. And so this is a way to regularize payments so that we're able to replace the important expensive equipment that the city needs.
Ms. Ludlow, I do see Mr. Anderson has joined.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson, would you either like to have a question or state, have a comment? Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, so when I came in, it all of a sudden muted and was crazy. So anyway.
You're on.
Hello, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You know, sometimes schedules don't line up, and thank you, Ms. Mayor, for letting me on. I had some questions, and I had some comments based on history that we have. And if you look, we'll have in the last number of years, oh, that's not doing what it should. Anyway, in the last 5 years, we've had revenues that have been pretty much the same, but we've increased our deficiencies from an excess of money of $925,000 in 17 to a proposed $6.466 million deficit in 2021. Everybody knows that was a COVID-19 budget, and I don't think anybody looks at those numbers and says, gee, we ought to be yelling about those numbers. You know, nobody knew, and I understand, Ms. Ludlow, that you couldn't have known, none of us knew, so I appreciate the time. But what my issue is that over the past 4 years, this council has approved increasing deficiencies in revenue. They've gone, our total unassigned balance, where we have basically savings account, I think Ms. Marielle talked about that, has gone from 6.9 million in fiscal 19 to 4.5 million in fiscal 20 to 1.848 million in 21. That leaves us with nothing, and if we continue spending at the same rate, we'll end up with no money in fiscal 22 based on that we can actually use for a variety of things that isn't unassigned, it isn't assigned. So anyway, I'd just like to ask the council how the reconciliation that they're doing will address this fundamental systemic issue that is going on. And that's all I had to say, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I don't think anyone else has joined us.
Mayor, if I just might say one thing, and that is that one of the things that's very difficult about looking at budget documents is that those are kind of prospective numbers and judging against a variety of plans looking over time. I do ask that people refer to the comprehensive annual financial report when we're looking at what how our reserves are being handled and how the things change over time, because that's the more accurate number.
Yeah, and I will just say that also our colleague, Councilwoman Searcy, did an amazing PowerPoint that she shared with the constituents of her ward using the numbers from actuals and the CAFRA, and it actually shows our trend is to actually spend less over time than have deficit spending. So again, if we're talking about trends, we must look at the actuals and our CAFRA, which is available on the city website, because the projections in the budget are just that, they're projections and they're estimates. And so I just wanted to say thank you again to Councilwoman Searcy for pulling together that information this weekend. I don't think the other folks who were to join us have. I think we've answered, I checked off almost all, I think all the questions that were raised tonight. I know we've gotten in some additional information from the Deputy City Manager this afternoon. So I'm going to suggest to my colleagues that we take this time to take a break, get some dinner, go look at the information that was just provided to us, and come back at 7:30. Sound good? All right, sounds awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks.